Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel where we do painting tutorials. Today I'll be painting on a canvas, and it's an actual wooden frame canvas. They usually come with these wooden keys that I'm quickly going to hammer in place on the slots on the angles of the canvas. I'm using a hammer because I don't have the physical strength to put them in place. Sorry, I need to go to the gym more. And what this does, it pulls the canvas, and once I apply water, it's not going to fall in the center. The canvas is going to stay nice and stretched. You're not gonna get a big puddle of water right in the center. And I just spray paint my watercolor paint so they activate and they get nice and creamy. And I also spray the canvas because it's a big 20 by 60 canvas, and it's gonna be a pain to wet all with a brush. Then I get my Azo Yellow Deep and I apply it horizontally in the middle across my canvas. I actually go a bit diagonally, very slightly from the top right towards the bottom left, but very slightly. Then I get my quinacridone rose and I apply it above and below my yellow as to sandwich it between. I'm going for a very dramatic sunset, so I'm using very saturated colors. I'm not mixing them, I'm not diluting them, I'm using colors straight from the half pans. And since we wet the background, they're all going to blend smoothly into each other, and they're going to look like soft cotton candy once we're finished. For the top left corner, I use some ultramarine blue and I bring it towards my quinacridone rose. That way they mix and they make a very nice violet. I add some thin diagonal lines across the sky to do that dramatic look I'm going for. And I just keep building up my colors. I apply more blue on that corner. I mix it on the top of the painting with my quinacridone rose. Then I get more of my rose and I reapply it on the same areas I did in the first layer. And mind you, the background is still wet, so it's still going to all transition smoothly into each other. And lastly, I just get more yellow and I go on top of the first areas where I applied the yellow. It took a good half an hour for everything to dry. Keep in mind, canvas dries much slower than watercolor paper, and it's very similar to working on 100% cotton. It feels very similar to Fabriano Artistico 300 grams if you've ever used that. And you can see the smooth finish we get after half an hour of drying. Then I get my palette and I'm going to mix my ultramarine with my quinacridone rose in about a 2:1 ratio, much more blue than rose. And mind you, I'm just using primary triad. I'm using yellow, red, and blue. And whenever I paint in this style, I like to go in a 2:1, meaning I use 2 cold colors and 1 warm color, or 2 warm colors and 1 cold color. That way, when I mix all of them together, I'm going to get a very dark, nice black. Whereas if I use only warm colors, I'd get a brown. If I used only cold colors, I'd get a greenish gray. That's just my personal preference, and it's why I'm using these specific colors. Now with my ultramarine quinacridone rose mix, I paint this mountain right below halfway up the canvas. I do a zigzag line for the mountain tops, and then I just roughly paint below them. It doesn't matter because there are going to be more mountains up front, so if you mess the bottom, do not worry. Once dry, I mix slightly a more bluish violet with a bit more ultramarine this time. And I paint a second mountain right in front of that one, starting from the top, go to the bottom, to the top, to the bottom. You can take all of the creative freedom you want here. I'm actually viewing a reference picture on my smartphone and I'm painting from that. If you're interested, it's going to be linked down in the description box along with all of the supplies. And there will be a traceable and a full-time tutorial to this painting available over at my Patreon page, Sunshine Arts. And by doing so, you also help support me and the channel. Back to the painting. Specifically for painting the mountains, I like to do one big brush stroke for the top of the mountains to get a nice crisp edge, and then just I randomly fill in the bottom. And I do suggest you paint the bottom of your mountains, don't just leave the top crisp edge, because when you paint more and more mountains up front, you will see more of the white peeking through, and it's not gonna look very nice, at least in my opinion, because I want to hang this painting in my living room, so I'm putting a bit more effort to it just to make it extra nice. I actually dried my mountains, just the mountains, with my hair dryer on medium heat because I did have a half an hour to wait in between each and every single layer. We did have to wait for the sky to dry because we used a lot of water for that, and we needed to wait for the pigments and the water to settle down into the canvas to be properly absorbed. But for these mountains, it doesn't really matter because we have layers and layers and layers on top of each and every one of them. So yeah, I just dried up my second mountain and I mix a darker blue by using the same ultramarine quinacridone rose mix, but this time I add a slight amount of indigo blue, which is a very dark, a very intense blue color. I was actually thinking whether to use indigo or Payne's Gray, but I opted for indigo because it has a very nice, deep, rich blue undertone, so it was going to just tie the whole painting together and look very balanced and harmonious instead of going for straight black for this, even though Payne's Gray does have a more pigment to it than straight black, but I prefer to use indigo for this. If you do not have indigo, feel free to use Payne's Gray or lamp black or whatever you have. But this is what I had in my set and what I opted for. And obviously, if you don't have ultramarine, you can use phthalo blue, you can use Prussian blue, cobalt blue, any blue you want. And instead of quinacridone rose, you can use alizarin crimson, lake madder deep, any rosy cool red will do. Instead of the yellow, you can use even raw umber, you can use gamboge, cadmium yellow, any warm yellow will work. These are just the first alternatives that come into mind. And for the final layer, I just use a straight indigo from the half pan. I do not dilute it, I do not mix it with anything, I just use it as is, and I paint my final mountain going on top of the previous one. And I also use this technique to cover up any mistakes or any areas I'm not too happy with. Again, I just do the mountain edge first and then I cover in everything that's left over with more indigo. Since, like I said, I will be hanging this painting in my living room, I will also paint the sides of the wooden frame with my indigo on the bottom, the sides of my wooden frame. That way, once I hang it, you don't see a straight line beneath. That's fully optional. I'm only doing it because I intend to display this painting. And with that, we are finished. Here is the dry result. I'd like to give a very special thank you to my patrons for the month of March, and thank you all for watching. We will see each other in the next video. Bye bye!